Hey, it is brilliant to be back with you for another session of 252. And in this session, we are looking at the fact that Jesus grew in favor with men, or in favor with people. Really, that's what it's pointing to. Now, let's remind ourselves of what we've been talking about, that to grow here in a 252 context means to grow deliberately and on purpose. And in fact, not just deliberate and on purpose, but continuously. And this idea that Jesus, we see him as a 12-year-old, and the last thing we hear is he grew in these four areas. And then the next time we meet him, he's a 30-year-old beginning his ministry. And in those 18 years of almost complete silence as far as the Bible is concerned, we know for a fact that Jesus deliberately, intentionally, and continuously grows. So we're going to be looking in this session at Jesus grew in favor with men. Now here's an amazing thought for us, and I'm sure some of you may have come across this. When you read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, one of the things that strikes you is Jesus' ability to negotiate people. The range of people that Jesus meets with and engages with is absolutely staggering. So he's talking to individuals, he talks to groups, he's with religious community, he can manage himself with the rich, he's comfortable with the poor, he seems to be at ease with women and men on equal measure, he's as happy having dinner with sinners as he is having dinner with the religious elite. And Jesus seems to be able to negotiate his emotional and relational world in the most amazing way. In fact, I would suggest to you, again, hopefully without stretching it too far, that Jesus demonstrates profound emotional intelligence. He is able to conduct himself in numerous different settings in the most incredible way. He's able to meet with and engage with lots of different people, which seems to point to the fact that Jesus was profoundly emotionally intelligent. Now, I know that we can say, well, of course he was emotionally intelligent. He was God. And I would suggest to you that's the sort of shortcut answer. That's the lazy answer. I think what Dr. Luke is saying to us, that even though Jesus is fully God, he is growing as a man. Now, if we're prepared to accept that idea, then we have to accept this idea that Jesus grows in favor with people. In other words, he grows in such a way that people like him, people engage with him. He can connect with people. He can negotiate with people. He can work with people. He seems to be comfortable in multiple settings, which is something that I am absolutely amazed by and inspired by, and can I say also challenged by in that regard. So Jesus is someone who demonstrates emotional intelligence, and I believe that's because, again, without stretching this too far, I believe that's because he understood himself, he had strong self-awareness, but also I think he works hard at understanding people. It's remarkable. So a little insight into this, for example, a little tender insight would be that Jesus often talks about widows. And every time he talks about a widow, she is a hero in his story. He talks about widows in the most tender way and often lifts them up and presents them really beautifully. Now, we could just say, well, that's because God's always been interested in widows and that's been part of the message. Or maybe because Jesus' own mother was a widow. Maybe Jesus learned something about what his mother went through, or he learned something about how she coped and how she overcame and her own spirituality. And that so impressed him and touched him that then the widow became part of his narrative. Maybe I'm stretching that too far, but I love that idea. And as someone whose own mother is a widow, having my mother as a widow has definitely changed my understanding of what widows go through. Maybe it's the same for Jesus. Now, maybe that's a clue into this learning to grow in favor with people. Jesus seems to be able to negotiate so brilliantly in many different settings. And if that's true, then actually it speaks to us. So regardless of our personality type, regardless of our background or our story, you and I, could it be possible for us to learn a little bit more about ourselves and learn a little bit more about other people so that we can negotiate better, so that we can go to work and negotiate better, so that we can engage with our neighbours and our friends and maybe those we don't like so much, so that we can negotiate with a world that's filled with people. And of course, if you're a follower of Jesus and you are part of a local Christian community, my goodness, we're surrounded by people. In fact, we can't really do our faith effectively without engaging with people. And that's been a challenge for me. I am, believe it or not, by nature an introvert. My personality preference is that I am an introverted person. I draw energy from myself and I'm very happy being in my own company. But actually, I learned a very powerful lesson years and years ago that personality type is not prison, it's preference. That actually I don't need to be trapped by my personality type. I need to be aware of it. I need to respect it. But I can train it. I can speak to it. I can improve it. I can actually minister into that, so that even though I remain fundamentally today an introvert, I've sort of learned to negotiate by two things. Number one, being a bit more self-aware. Number two, being a bit more aware of the people around me, learning about the world in which I live. And for me and you as followers of Jesus, people are our business. You know, when it comes to God, He loves people, He's invested into people, and we really can't do church in the way that we believe it's possible without engaging with people. So somehow, you and I have to learn to grow in favor with those around us. And when it comes to emotional intelligence, we just need to think about this. A definition of emotional intelligence is this: the measure of an individual's ability to recognize and manage their emotions and the emotions of other people, both individually and as a group. My goodness, what a challenge that is. It's hard enough managing my own emotions without sort of managing the emotions of the world around me. Now, if we're prepared to work with that definition going forward, then it points to three dynamic ideas. And I think we can see all of these ideas in Jesus. So I hope I'm not overstretching the point. What I'm really doing now is looking at the science of emotional intelligence and reading it back into the world of Jesus in order to help us go forward. When we look at emotional intelligence, there are three key elements, many more, I suppose, but there's like three dominant ideas that stand out. The first idea is the idea of self-awareness. In order to be emotionally intelligent, I must become more self-aware. And of course, with that definition we've looked at, also aware of the world around me. That will help me to behave more appropriately, or help me to behave, can I say, more intelligently. A definition of self-awareness would read like this: having a deep understanding of one's emotions as well as one's strengths and limitations and one's values and motives. That's a definition from Daniel Goleman in his book, New Leaders. I like that, having a deep understanding. So you know, if we're thinking about our emotions, our strengths, our weaknesses, our values, our motives, actually the key idea there is I need to be aware of those. I cannot live ignorantly about those. I can't just ignore those and then wonder why I keep bashing into people and wondering why people keep bashing into me. I am being called by Jesus in this context of Luke 2:52 to think about how I'm wired, to understand that, and to become more self-aware of that. Some of you will be aware of the 4 stages of learning. I love these. I find these quite humorous, quite funny, and a little bit challenging. The 4 stages of learning. You know, we start with the unconscious incompetence. And most of us, all of us, have been there. You know, we are doing something and we don't even realize that that thing we're doing isn't that good. We don't realize how we're coming across. We don't realize that we're being maybe obnoxious. We don't realize how we're being read or felt in a room. We're just completely unaware of what's happening. But of course, life and community have a wonderful and nasty habit of making us aware of that. And so we move from unconscious incompetence into conscious incompetence. We become aware, oh my goodness, I didn't realize I was sounding like that I didn't realize I was so aggressive. I didn't realize my attitude was so poor. I didn't realize. And of course, the challenge is once you realize, you reach a sort of a tipping point moment, because when you realize that something's not right, what you do next is crucial. So you can either ignore the world that's making you aware of what's going on, or you can do something about it. And of course, if you do something about it, hopefully you move from conscious incompetence into conscious competence. So you go, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that. So I'll fix that. I'll work on that. I'll develop in that. And I will move to a place of competency. And that's where growth happens. The growth happens when you and I make a decision to change. When you and I make a decision, I need to do something about that. When you and I realize that personality is not a prison but a preference, that actually I can grow up, I can change, I can learn to behave more appropriately in different contexts with different people. And then, of course, the danger from there, we go from conscious competence to unconscious competence. And they say, John, why is that a danger? Because the minute you become unconscious about your competence, which is a great place to be because you can do it without thinking about it. So on one level, it's brilliant because I don't have to think about it. I'm just now in it and I'm doing it. The danger with that, of course, is that can quickly become unconscious incompetence. So you've got a moment, another tipping point moment, that when I become unconsciously competent, I must be careful that that doesn't lead me into incompetence again, especially unconscious incompetence. So that's where community is important, that's where learning is important, and that's where being around people is really important. So self-awareness is crucial. I've really had to take myself seriously on this, and I've really had to do some work. I've had to become more aware of myself because of the world I live in, because of the job I do, because of the call on my life. I cannot just be ignorant of myself. And more than that, I've just got to learn about people. I've got to think, well, this is how people work, and therefore learn about them so that I can negotiate better with them. The second area of emotional intelligence is self-management. And if you think about it, that's an obvious next step. I become self-aware, therefore I learn to self-manage. A definition from Goleman on self-management is this idea. It's the component of emotional intelligence which frees us from being a prisoner to our feelings. I love that. It frees me from being a prisoner to my feelings. Now, of course, that's not easy. That's super tough. But actually, once I become more self-aware, I can start to intelligently and intentionally manage myself. I can start to think about, this is why I do what I do, therefore. Or this is why I feel the way I feel, therefore. And that's been a tremendous help to me, where I have personally, literally put things in place to help manage myself. So that in my engagements with other people, not only am I a little bit more aware, but I am then learning how to manage my own feelings on many different things, and simply not allow my feelings to lead me, but allow truth to lead me a little bit more. We're all desperately vulnerable if we allow our feelings to lead us, and our world will be a very unsafe place if that's the case. Here's the last idea in that idea of emotional intelligence. We have self-awareness, we have self-management. Last one, empathy. Empathy. A definition of empathy is this. At the highest levels, empathy is understanding the issues or concerns that lie behind another's feelings. When we look at Jesus, we can really see that tremendously. Jesus has an amazing ability to get behind the face and understand what some of the drivers are. Now, there's no doubt sometimes he does that by the power of the Holy Spirit. But other times I think he's doing that because he's learned to understand people. And that's why I think people liked Jesus. That's why I think sinners liked hanging around Jesus. That's why I think actually the crowds enjoyed being with Jesus, because not only was he an amazing teacher, not only did he do miracles, but he actually got people. And if we can learn to get people a little bit more, I think our lives are better and potentially their lives are better. So have a reflect, have a think, have a chat around this idea of 252. Jesus grew in favor with people, and as a result, improved himself and improved his world. Hey, until next time, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.